If they're building on greenfield, they have to.
Yeah.
We've also got through the site, if you want to make use of it, is this historic watercourse, which could very easily be used for attenuation.
But there are, as I said, there are 3 mandatory requirements you've got to do something about. You don't get any points for them, though. You've got to do them regardless. There are then some mandatory things you've got to do which you do get points for. So at level 3, the only thing is that you've got to limit your water use to 105 litres per person per day. And this is done by fitting reasonably efficient water sanitary goods. Good dual flush toilets, lowish flow, low volume baths, lowish flow taps. Nothing serious, but you've got to be a bit careful and make sure you get the right fittings, and you'll meet that standard. At level 4, you've got the same water use requirement, but you also got, it's got to be more energy efficient than building regs. Level 3 energy and building regs are the same. Level 4 is a 25% improvement. If you go up to level 5, you've got to make 100% improvement on emissions. That means you've got to offset all of those regulated emissions from heating, lighting, hot water and pumps and fans with some form of low energy technology, usually PV. You've got to now drop your water use to 80 litres, and that gets more difficult because you've got to use very low flow, very low volume, or it can be done just through the sanitary goods, or you've got to fit, say, a rainwater harvesting system, which means you can then use some of that and cut your water use further. And you've also got to hit this new thing called the Fabric Energy Efficiency Standard. So for Code 5, it's the first time you've got to limit the energy that your house uses for regulated emissions. And then at Code 6, where you get an extra point there, you've got to offset all the other emissions. So you've got to offset, and they calculate these by a formula, what you use for all your appliances, and you've got to put some more renewables on to offset those. Water use is the same as 5, fee is the same as 5, and you've got to meet lifetime homes if you want a Code 6 house. So those are mandatory, but they get points.
Lifetime homes was sort of wheelchair.
It's to do with, if you've got, yes, it's to do with becoming less able as you get older so that you can stay in the house. Okay. This keeps changing, it's the sort of timeline, but this is the Fabric Energy Efficiency Standard, but they keep changing whether they're going to measure it in carbon. I think we'll leave that for the moment because this is all up for grabs. They keep changing whether they're going to measure it in terms of carbon or in terms of energy. Okay, very quickly let's talk about the energy section here. These are the credits available. So within this section, these are relatively how valuable they are. And you can see that you've got only 10 at Code 6, but for the rest of them, everything up to Code 5, you've got 9 credits here and 9 credits here. That's 18. And they're weighted up. It's about 20% of your total scores in those two alone. Now build a really great building with very, very low energy consumption and stick a bit of renewables on it, which is not very much renewables now because it hasn't got it's already got a small footprint. You get lots of points here, and that's good because it makes everything else a lot easier if you're doing code. If you put low and zero carbon technologies on as well, you also, once you get to 10% you get a point, and 15% you get 2 points, so you get a double hit. You get some points here and you knock something off there. Yeah? So if you've got, say, 4 points here with nothing here, as soon as you put something on there, that might go up to 6 points, and you get 2 points there. So there's a double whammy from your renewables. But that improvement here gets bigger when this is good. You following me? If you've got a very, this is where it gets kind of complicated. You're juggling lots of things. Energy display devices telling you how much energy you're using. You can get a couple of points for those. They cost about 600 quid, and you can't do them for all fuels. You can get them if you're on gas here, or something like that. Then E.ON have got a deal now, we can get them for free, maybe. Putting a washing line in for £5 will get you a point. 4 metres of drying line, yeah? Worth doing. Actually, you don't even have to put the whirligig in. You have to make sure there's a hole for it. As long as there's a hole, you get the points. If you fit white goods, fridges, freezers, washing machines and so forth, if you fit A star and A rated according to the plan, you can get points for that. You're all going to have a fridge probably and a freezer maybe. possibly a washing machine. If you're a co-housing unit, you might not. But anyway, you can get stuff for that. External lighting. If you've got external lighting, as long as it's compliant, this points to that. Cycle storage. I have an issue with this. Give you a cycle store. What if you don't want a bike and you never use a bike because you walk to work,
You're in
but you
Cambridge.
don't need a cycle store? I know you're in Cambridge, yeah. So it might, but in some places we're putting cycle stores in. People, what do I want that for? And because of the nature of the complying with that, their cycles, what is a cycle store to them, you end up with a shed in the garden, looking horrible, with a big Sheffield stand cemented into the ground. And somebody goes, where do I put my lawnmower? Anyway, another story. Home office provision. So there you go, there's 30% of your potential score in that lot alone. And 20% of it in two things. Okay, so that's the energy bit. We dealt with regulated emissions, sorry, that shouldn't be there. This is what the emissions picture looks like. Just to here we have regulations. It's the same thing as Code 3, so we call that 100%. We've got to chop 25% off the Code 4, lose it all for Code 5, and it's about a 150%, up to 150%, depending on the house. This changes. It's all based around occupancy. So you can see there's a drive to drive emissions down. Personally, I think Code 6 is a waste of time. Let's just very quickly talk about FEE, the Fabric Energy Efficiency Standard, because this is finally coming in. It's saying you cannot build a house which is low, which is high in energy use, and put bling on it. You've got to build a decent house before you put the bling on. So, detached and semis, 46 watts per metre squared. Terraces and flats, 39. End terraces are like semis, so they're 46. This is due to come in, but it might not come in at this level. We don't know. We never know till after the event with governments, unfortunately. But at the moment, this is only mandatory at level 5. It should be there. You really need it.
Can you just go back? That's energy demand in
That is
watts.
the watts per metre squared. So that's, yeah, you'll also see this measured in kilowatt hours per metre
Yeah.
squared per year. It's how much energy your house uses divided by its floor space.
Yeah, fine.
So it's
it's not energy loss, but what was just
well, it is.
attracting, yeah. But what was
No.
it? What was just attracting my attention is that demonstrates what Jim was talking about, the difference between a detached house and a terraced house,
Yeah.
and don't buy the one on the end.
Yeah. There's a real problem with SAP and this idea of percentage reduction, because if you build flats, they're inherently very energy efficient
Yeah.
because they've got very small heat loss area. This is directly related to heat loss, actually. Yes, it is. So to improve something that's inherently efficient is really difficult because there's nothing to play with. You've got a wall at the back and a wall at the front.
Yeah.
You'll have a big house.
Yeah.
Easy. You improve all that fabric, it gets a lot better. So this idea of percentage of is bonkers. That's what we need. We need an energy that says every person in the country, whether they're a king or a pauper, whether they're living in a 2 square metre box on the street or a 365 bedroom mansion, shouldn't be using more than that much energy per square metre. Yeah? ENE7 is about low and zero carbon technologies, which for the purposes of most of us is solar, possibly wind, solar thermal. And that's the benefit you get. You've got to hit 10%, reduce your emissions by 10% for 1, 15 for 2. So you might have solar thermal, you might have solar PV tiles, you might have a wind turbine which doesn't work. Water use. I love this idea. As you wash your hands, you kill this goldfish, so you don't use much water. That's great, isn't it? In every school. What one is about internal water use. That's about how much the person in the house uses per day. All right? So that's about low flow toilets and so forth. And external water use is about providing a water butt so you can water your garden with rainwater. And as long as you've got one that you can take a lid off and clean out, and it's 200 litres if you're a 4-bedroom house, you comply. So 20 quid, 1 point. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about materials. There's a mandatory bit that says you've got to have some points under materials, but none of the rest is mandatory. They're not worth very much, and they're a pain in the backside to achieve. I always advise we go for that, because on a well-built house, timber frame or something, I'll get 12 out of 15 points without too much trouble. So I might as well have them. They're only then worth about 4 points by the weighting system, but we go for them. Responsible sourcing is about where does most of the materials for the fabric and for the finishing of the house come from. It means you've got to have chain of custody. Now, if you go down the road and say, oh, my mate's got a larch wood down the road, I'm going to use larch from his wood. That's sustainable. It's only a mile away, very low miles. It's, he's going to replant it. Forget it. You can't prove, you haven't got all the bits of paper to show that it's sustainably managed.
But at the same time, if you're specifying for a not generic, but if you don't know who's constructing or where the materials are coming from, then it has an advantage.
If you're specifying, then the important thing with timber, for example, is to specify correctly the right level. So FSC, if you're using, say, hardwoods, but something lower like PEFC, which is still a recognised sustainable mark, which allows the builder a bit more room. But this is a very difficult one to police. It requires your contractor to keep track of everything, or most everything. So, and it does have the anomaly that, build it out of straw bale, there's no chain of custody to prove that straw is sustainably managed straw. You wouldn't get those points.
No, I think in one-off cases you're absolutely right. When you've got a change to the standard, but actually if you're using standard building supply, standard procurement routes, then it's not an issue.
Buy through most of the majors, certainly their timber will be fine. And in a timber frame house, you probably find that you could possibly get those points just by attacking the frames. It covers the walls, the floors, the ceilings, all the other materials involved there, the windows, the staircase. And this is everything inside. But to be honest, unless you need the points, you don't go for them. Thank you. Surface water runoff is about meeting no extra. You can get a bit if you attenuate up to a 5 mil rainfall event. And this has to be calculated by water engineer, you get another point, and then if you do it through a subsystem, sustainable and drainage, you can get more points. You also have to deal with flood risk. If you're in a flood risk area, is this a flood risk area? No? Zone 1? Zone 1? Yeah. Zone 1 is the zero flood risk, sort of very low risk.
I'd have to check.
Yeah.
It's not when you go to the...
There's nothing on the
No,
environmental.
there's a risk. No.
it's no.
Probably zone 1, in which case you get that by default. Waste. Waste is about the storage of household waste. So in your kitchen and outside, providing space so that you can have your recycling bins and all that sort of thing. And it's fairly easy to do, and most people would do it, but you've got to specify it correctly. WAS 2 is about construction site waste management. So it's about what the builder's going to do when he's building your house. And that's quite difficult with a small builder, but the big boys, the major contractor, you have site waste management plans? Yeah, we'll have site waste management plans, so they cover that. Composting is about providing the compost bin. 10 quid, done. But that's the waste side. Pollution is about two things. It's about your insulants and the global warming potential of any blowing agents or foaming agents. So you have to show all the different insulations that go into the house and show that they're either non-blown and foamed, like fibre, fine, or if they are blown or foamed, what was used to do that. So if they're blown with air or pentane, or most insulants are fine. But if they're blown with CFCs, you've got a problem. So it's about the insulation. And pole 2 is about NOx emissions, which is your boiler or your heating system. So if you've got a gas boiler, the chances are it'll be very low NOx. If you've got an oil boiler, it may be.
Sorry, does NOx mean noxious or nitrous oxide?
Nitrous oxide, sorry. If you've got a biomass boiler or electricity, high NOx. No points. Health and well-being, lots of points here. HEA 1 is about daylighting, and it's about minimum standards, and they're not onerous. It's 2% in a kitchen, 1.5% in your living areas, and 1.5% in your home office, and that's about good design. Because if you have, 1.5% in living areas and home office.
What area or
Daylight factor, which is window, it's to do with the window area, the internal surface area of the room, the angle of the glazing, the amount of sky and a dirt factor. It's a calculation which we have to do. Basically, if you design a house nicely, it'll have good daylight. If you design it with very deep rooms and very small windows, it won't. There's also a point of view of sky, which I try and avoid because I've got to calculate. And you've got to get all the site plans and work out all the buildings and the trees are and how much sky can you see. But good building, your site with a good layout and good won't be a problem. Sound insulation is about party walls, attenuating party walls. Private space, having somewhere to go which is yours, even in a flat. It's not onerous, I think it's about something like 3 or 4 square metres for a 2-bed flat. So a balcony counts as it if it's private and nobody else can get onto it. Private space. Detached house with a garden, private space. Lifetime homes. It's about access predominantly. It's about being able to put in a bedroom into the ground floor if necessary, access to bathrooms, being able to fit a lift, so knockouts for lifts. It's about the access outside. If you're on a very slopey site, as one job I'm recently finishing off on, very, very steep site, we can get some points for all the things in lifetime homes except 2 sections, section 2 and 3, which are to do with access. Because they recognise that on those sites it's difficult, but on your site you should be able to get the lot. And that again is very cheap to do because it's about good architecture. And the architect knowing the rules and saying, well, I'll make sure that the turning circle for a wheelchair is there and the corridors are wide enough and the thresholds are flat and so forth. So that, you should just get that. Management is about 4 things. It's about having a home user guide. You know, people go out and buy a 15,000 little motor car and they get a 200-page manual. You go out and buy a £200,000 house. If you're lucky, the contractor's left you the boiler manual. Bonkers. So you've got to produce your own user guide. It's just a manual. It tells you where everything is, how it works, including the surroundings. So if you've got communal bins and bike stores, you know, all that sort of thing. Man 2 is about considerate constructors. If you're using a big contractor, they will probably be registered as a considerate constructor or a similar scheme. If you're building your own house in the country using a local builder, the chances are it won't be. So you start to see that for the self-builders, the small self-builders, some of these things are just not available. It's a bit unfair, I think. Man 3 is about construction site impact, so it's about things like dust and water pollution and how they manage the construction site for impact. And the last one, secured by design. Now that is about layout of the site, so it's about avoiding places where people can hide, for example, you know, the burglar with his swag bag, but it's also a lot about fixings and fittings, windows and doors to make them not easy to break into, laminated glass on the ground floor so they can't be kicked in and so forth. It can be a bit of a problem with these things, big bifold, slidey foldy doors. Because of the nature of them, they're not terribly secure. But if you don't use them, it's not usually a problem. You also have to work with the architectural liaison officer, the copper who's responsible for design, in order to show that you consulted and taken their advice. Last one is ecology. First one is the ecological value of your site. That site will have ecological value by default because it's been pasture land for years.
But not for the last 5, I mean historically it was, but it's been, I'm glad it's probably classified as brownfield, but I don't know.
Yeah. Brownfield, if something's left for more than 12 months or 24 months, I never remember this, it starts to develop value. Because some of the most interesting ecology is on brownfield sites in cities.
And I think there is a question for the group as a whole about, is about, we've discussed the trees to some degree, but how much you value the existing, and independent of the code, but as you as a group, you know, how much you value what might be there, and whether you want to you know, adjust the layout accordingly.
Yeah. So if you've got ecological value, and you will have by default, then you're into these, which is, firstly, are you going to enhance it? You're going to make it better? Well, if it's basically grassland, not very interesting grassland, then almost anything you do is going to improve it. And you probably want to improve it because you want to plant up your site, make it look lovely, and maybe want some more trees. Secondly, are you going to protect the things that are there? So that's anything, tree over 100 mil diameter, you've got to protect these trees. So yeah, you might want to do that, so you get some points for that. And thirdly, the change in the value. Once you've done all this, is it worse or better? And there's much worse, worse, neutral, a little bit better and a lot better are the 5 areas. If you've got no ecological value, you automatically come in at 3 there. But if you improve the site, you get more points there, and they're good points to have as well. And the very last thing is the building footprint. And that's about the living area to floor to footprint ratio. So a bungalow, 1 to 1. 2-storey house, 2 to 1. 3-storey house, 3 to 1. A mixture of the same, you're going to get various ratios, maybe up to 4 to 1. If you go higher, even more. But you get points at 2.5 to 1 on detached dwellings and 3 to 1 on flats and above. So it pays for code if you happen to be building good density, slightly higher than average density, not bungalows. So that's the code very, very quickly. It's taken me several years to get to that level of understanding. Don't try, just employ your code assessor and they'll do it for you. But there's a lot in there. The important thing, is it something you want to do? You might be advised, forced.
Oh, this is the planning.
Planners?
Currently, I think there's a requirement for code 4.
Right, a requirement for code 4. Okay. You can get code 4 energy with fabric alone. You design your houses well without renewables. And if you get lots, and if you put some renewables on, you get lots more energy points. Code will not be hard to level 4. Good fabric, not too bad. Build a very average home, and you'll have to work a lot harder and do a lot more of those things. Build well, and we can, social housing we're doing, I scored it without doing anything to the design. They're standard designs, and we came out, we met code 3, and then they turned around and said, oh, they just told us we've got to go to 4, and I said, fine, you just bang some PV on the roof, you're there. Very easy, very quick, not particularly elegant, but it's that simple, so get the fabric right.
And I think the other thing, stepping away from code for a minute, is there may be some things that come up in here which may be code 5 or code 6 that you find very interesting, or actually think you'd like to include. There's no reason why we can't, as part of the climate brief, define code 4 plus another element, which might give you what you want rather than what the council may require.
Yeah, so over and above it, you might say, well, we actually would like to informally go to sort of code 5. Fine. I say to a lot of clients, use it as a tool, because it's quite a good tool, but don't get hung up on getting the points, because some of them you will find are completely counterintuitive. If it's forcing you to do something you wouldn't normally do, then it's not sustainable. But it's a checkbox. This is environmental accounting. I'm an environmental accountant. God. Okay. If you're a big builder, it's easy. The cost per house might be a couple of £100 in terms of there's additional cost in fabric, and they whinge about it all the time and say how much it costs them. But if you're a self-builder, firstly you've got to pay the whole of the assessment fee, which I'll tell you is not cheap. I do it for about £2,000, and it's a lot of work. You've got to pay all that on one house rather than 200. And there are things you can't do, and you've got extra cost. It's much more onerous on the small builder. Probably not you guys if you build out this site as 1 or 2 phases, but if you're all individually doing it, it is onerous. Now, when you talked about self-build, I didn't know whether there was a plan for any actual individual commission houses on this site, or
not at present.
No.
I think because of the way that the land is being sold and various accumulated VAT commitments, I think that it has to be taken on by a developer who will then. The way it's being discussed at the moment, correct me if anyone thinks differently. There'll be one main developer who will take on the design.
Right.
Past planning.
Yeah. So if you've got to do the code, everything's done as one. Great. Far better.
Yeah.
So design might be a better.
Yeah.
Self-design. Okay. Benefits and drawbacks. Environmental benefits. These are intended benefits. This is what I reckon. Reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Yes, but there's a lot of low and zero carbon offsetting going on in code, which means that you can still build houses and get a code rating, and they're not actually very good. They could be electrically heated, relatively inefficient, but still get there. Adaptation to climate change is another intended benefit of the code. Well, that depends on the accuracy of SAP, and it isn't accurate. It's the overheating, for example, is about adaptation to climate change. If it gets hotter, you don't go and buy an air conditioning unit and shove it in the window. SAP doesn't deal with overheating very well, so really, reduced environmental impact. Well, then I go on to this idea of local materials. Only if all possible options are able to be included, and it doesn't. It's fairly restrictive in some areas and doesn't let you do things which are obviously sustainable. To builders, it's allegedly a mark of quality. Well, I've never seen anybody marketing homes heavily as code X or code Y. They do a bit, but I think it's got limited life. Oh, code might be disappearing in the next year anyway. There's a very good chance that, yeah, almost definitely. Rationalise that. There's so many bloody things going on at the moment. There's so many different things you have to comply with that they're trying to rationalise it. The code is almost definitely going to go. And a lot of this will be incorporated into regs, and some of it will come out elsewhere. So, well, regulated certainty. There's limited certainty on it, actually. And it's been changing too fast for the industry. Changes every 3 years or too much. Flexibility. Yeah, there is flexibility. You can choose what you score points on, but only to a certain degree. And at Code 6, no way. You've just got to get everything you can get. So, I don't agree with that. Social housing providers. Lower running costs was a stated benefit. No. Martin's got a client. They put air source heat pumps into a load of social housing. The bills are coming in that are so high because they're wrongly spec'd, wrongly fitted, not working properly, that the landlord is actually subsidising the client's fuel bills, correct?
Yes.
Air source heat pumps, be careful. I should say, not unless a pure energy standard is adopted. You can still have high running costs that meet code. Improved comfort and satisfaction. Yeah, there's probably some benefits from that. But nobody's measuring them, to my knowledge. Raise sustainability credentials, possibly, but only again if we're monitoring it. There's a lot of code building been done at the end of the build process, and frankly, it's full of lies. Benefits to consumers, assists choice. Well, I think I'll go out and buy a Code 4 house. I'm not sure that's happening. Reducing the environmental footprint. Again, we're not proving that they're working. Lower running costs, same thing, we're not proving this. Improved well-being, maybe. But all these benefits that are claimed for code are so forth. So, in the absence of another standard, yes, I would say it's worth having. We haven't got anything else that's very good. We need more post-occupancy monitoring. Not flexible for small builders. And this is the one I don't like. It can make you do things you don't want to do. 4,000 quid for rainwater harvesting just to achieve a water standard when most of your energy in water goes into heating it, not using it and producing it. And I've got real issues over perfection, because I think perfection is something we chase. There are 3 definitions of zero carbon home at the moment for different purposes. They've never settled on one. So, sorry, I'm rattling through this very quickly, but does that sort of give you a feel of what code's about? And why you've got to get 4. Okay, my advice on this, if you've got to get 4, don't worry about it. Build really good houses. Get your code assessor in right at the beginning. You won't have a problem. And it won't cost you a fortune. Okay, that's a pass. We want to be warm and comfy. We're worried about our fuel bills. We're worried about future energy costs. And we're worried about carbon and climate change. Yeah? We might add some things that might be cold. Jumping around, you see. Do you want to run around?
That's all right.
So, most houses are heat sieves. Yeah? So you can either turn the tap on faster, because it's flowing out so fast, or you can plop the holes up. That's what passive house does. Just get rid of the losses. There, that one again. Remember that one? Remember what I said? You can do a bit about that. You can also do a bit about that. You can do a lot about that.